Have you ever looked in the mirror and wondered where those extra pounds have come from? Have you kind of thought, where has your youth gone and why do you feel so old at this point? The reality is things don't happen overnight and they take time to get there, but with health, it deteriorates at a very slow rate that you don't even notice it's happening. And then you wake up one morning, you're 20 pounds overweight and you're wondering, how did you get to this point? Let me show you in this video how you fucked up.
Go to concerts with your great-grandchildren. That's amazing.
Fear itself is a tremendously powerful lever. And when I say a lever, I mean a chemical lever.
It's not that they don't get heart attacks. They just don't get them when they're 65.
That a regular gratitude practice can enhance many, many aspects of our physical and mental health.
I mean, there is simply no better elixir for metabolic health than being active.
So if you're above the age of 30 or hit 30 years old, your muscle mass starts to deteriorate at a rate of about 5% per decade, every 10 years. So from 30 to 40, you're going to lose about 5%, and then 40 to 50, you lose another 5%, and so on and so forth. That's if you are not consistent with your weight training. When you hit 60 years old, that number goes up to 12% until the day you die. Again, this is if you're not lifting weights. So I want to paint a picture here for you, and I want to kind of pull back the curtain and show you what's happening on the inside so you understand why these numbers matter and they haven't changed. I want to introduce you to Ahmed. So when Ahmed is 30 years old and life gets in the way, he gets married, he has a kid, his career is on the rise, he decides that fitness or his health isn't a priority, so he goes to the gym less and decides that he's going to focus on eating less food so he doesn't gain the weight. And at 30 years old, like we said before, you're going to lose 5% of your muscle mass every decade. So fast forward, and Ahmed is 40 years old now, and he still weighs 180 pounds, but because he's lost 5% of his muscle mass, his composition looks a bit different. Instead of having 153 pounds of muscle, he has 145 pounds of muscle and 35 pounds of body fat. That translates into 19% body fat. So he's gone up from 15% to 19% now. So we can already see that things are starting to go in the wrong direction, and he's only 40 years old. Let's fast forward now again 10 years into the future. So Ahmed is now 50 years old. He still weighs 180 pounds, but his composition is changing again. He's lost again another 5% of his muscle mass, which is another 7 pounds, give or take. And his composition looks like this. He's at 138 pounds of muscle, 42 pounds of body fat, which puts him at 23% body fat. So now we are starting to go into the unhealthy range of percentages in terms of body fat, and he's only at 50 years old. Now we're going to jump again another 10 years into the future. So Ahmed is at 60 years old now. He still weighs 180 pounds, but his composition is going to look a bit different again. So he's losing another 5% of his muscle mass, which means it's about 7 pounds. And now he has 131 pounds of muscle, 49 pounds of body fat, and he's gone up to 27% body fat. So he's gone from 15% body fat when he was about 30 years old to being in his 60s, and he's gone up to 27% body fat, but he weighs the exact same on the scale. Now, this is where things start to go downhill and very fast. So Ahmed is 60, and if you remember at the beginning of the video, I told you beyond 60 years old, give or take, your drop in muscle mass decreases by 12%. So it was 5% every decade, now it's gone up to 12% per decade, and that's for a number of reasons, including hormonal and lifestyle. However, 12% decrease per decade now. So look at the numbers, how compounding they become at this point. So Ahmed is 70 years old now, and his body composition, he still weighs 180 pounds. 114 of that is muscle, 65 pounds of that is body fat, which is 36% overall. Now Ahmed has become obese. So that is probably the best case scenario for people that aren't consistent with their weight training. Now imagine, which isn't far off, that over the years Ahmed gained weight about 20 pounds. So from his 30s to let's say around his 60s or 70s, he's gained about 20 pounds, which is not unrealistic, okay? So those 20 pounds, how are they going to look in terms of his body composition? So remember, he's 70. his muscle mass is going to decrease by 12% now. So, and he's gained another 20 pounds in terms of body weight. So his composition is going to look very different now. He's 70 years old. He weighs 200 pounds, 115 pounds of muscle, 85 pounds of body fat. That's 43% body fat. So what's going to happen now? He's at 43% body fat. I'm sure there's going to be a whole range of diseases in terms of being diabetic, pre-diabetic, possibly high blood pressure, and everything else that goes with it. His activity level is going to go down drastically because he's heavy, he can't move very well. So it becomes a cycle of inactivity which compounds difficulty of him losing weight. In terms of his ability to fix or gain muscle becomes a lot more difficult. This is what brings me back to the main point of this video, is that as you've neglected yourself and because you were too lazy or you didn't prioritize your health by going to the gym a few times a week, lifting some weights, doing some resistance training, what's happened in your 70s is that your quality of life has gone down the drain. You're unable to move, you're going to need to rely on people around you to help you, and that doesn't include any other diseases in terms of heart diseases as well that you're going to have to deal with at that point in your life. And the fix is very simple. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's very simple in the sense that we need to do some resistance training, like I've talked about before, for us to avoid having sarcopenia, which is the loss of muscle mass, later on in our life. That is the critical part of why we weight train. That's why we do it. It's not because we want to look good. It's not because we're going to burn fat. The reality is that that's the only way you're going to avoid hitting a wall later on in your life. How do I fix that? And how people watching this in that age groups of your late 20s, early 30s, where these sarcopenia starts to happen, or the loss of muscle mass if you're not active, what do? You need to be doing resistance training or weight training at least 3 to 5 days a week. That's the underlying thing that needs to be done. You also need to be able to eat adequate amounts of protein every single day to allow your body to recover from those weight training. And keep in mind, protein isn't only for muscle building. It goes into a lot of things in your body, including your immunity. And the third thing that you need to be able to do is manage your lifestyle. That means your sleep, your stress level, that go hand in hand with everything else for you and to allow your body to build and develop properly well into your 60s, 70s, and 80s maybe. Fourth point is as well that you need to make sure that you're eating the right amount of calories every day. You're not having more than you need and you're not having less than what your body needs. You need to find that balance of input and output to allow your body not to gain fat over time. It's hard to convince people to change their lifestyle now when they're feeling healthy. And like the example of Ahmed and what we talked about with him in his 30s and everything's looking good, he's at 15% body fat and he's gone from there all the way up to 43% body fat in his 70s. He's compromised his ability to do anything in his life. He's compromised his health, obviously. And now he's putting a burden on the people around him to have to take care of him because he's unable to. I put a little chart here together that I just want to show you the deterioration of the numbers. I've put you in a summary. And like I said, before we start, I want to talk about the first part is that we said you're losing about 5% of your muscle mass each decade. All right, so starting from about 30 years old, and these numbers are general, we're not very specific because everybody's different, but from the age of 30 to about 60, you're losing about 5% muscle mass every decade, every 10 years. Once you hit 60, that number goes up to 12% each decade. So in the left corner, in the left column here, we have muscle fat as a body weight, and then fat as a percentage as overall. And then the last one is your total weight over time, which in our example is not going to change. So at age 30, Ahmed has 153 pounds of muscle. He has 27 pounds of fat, and that equates to about 15% body fat, okay? And his overall weight is 180 pounds. That hasn't changed. Jump 10 years in the future, losing that 5% of muscle mass, you're looking at 145 pounds of muscle mass, you're looking at 35 pounds of fat, and 19% as a percentage body fat. Again, jump another 10 years in the future. He's 50 years old now. He's lost another 5% of his muscle mass, and his muscle mass now is 138 pounds. He's at 42 pounds in terms of fat, and that's 23% of his body fat. Jump another 10 years into his 60s, he's lost another 5% muscle mass. So his total muscle is 131 pounds. His fat has gone up to 49 pounds, which is 27% body fat. And lastly, where he's at 70 years old, this is where we said at 60, you start to compound and it goes up to 12% in terms of losing muscle mass. So his muscle mass is down to 114 pounds. His fat is at 65 pounds overall, which is insane. And his percentage is 36% overall. So these numbers you can see, he's gone from 15% to more than double that to 36% body fat. So those numbers will tell you that where you start to go into metabolic diseases and problems and heart disease and so on, we can see the numbers now. And it doesn't take a day to do that. It takes years and years and years of neglect for it to accumulate. This is one example of many other scenarios that can happen. It could be a lot worse. It could be a bit slower than that, but in general, it's going in the same direction. So I hope you enjoyed that video. Love it if you subscribed, if you shared this with people that will benefit. Maybe you're trying to convince somebody to do weight training and why it's important, especially with women, because we haven't even talked about osteoporosis and the issues with that. And as you get older, the chances of you falling and breaking a bone is a lot higher if you don't have a muscle mass. So if you feel this will benefit somebody and you want to convince them of doing weight training, this is the reason why you're doing it. And show them the numbers, show them why we need to do this, because once you're getting into your 70s, it becomes too late for us to kind of reverse all those problems.